This is the end, my friend, the end. This is the end, my friend, the end. Bosh is a mini. Welcome to the chat room. Welcome to the chat room. How we doing, chat? Who we got here tonight? Barbarians in. ICP Yowie. Alibert Jules. Alright there. Slow charging. I'll take slow charging over no charging. Alright. Very good couple of beers. Ziggy Wiggy starts. Oh, can't handle it, eh? Loves it. WV1 Lem. With one lem. Nick's View. Hello, Kermit. Hey, Kermit. Luzayo. Hey, Eva Strong. Fuck, yes. Donna Green. Mary. The OG Hambone. Pilcrow. We have some mangoes. Oh! Some muses dissent. Some muse dissent. Some muse dissent. There's so many ways you could say that. Sue mew says dissent. I like that. Hello, Alison. Two Marys in one chat could get a little confusing. Catted Tanglefoot. Nice. Greetings. I've got a slightly different seating arrangement. I'm not sure if this is going to help or hinder the process of me not falling asleep tonight. Lord Swordplay. You're Canadian, Mary. Okay. Let's be clear about that. We've got a Canuck in the house. Your government name is ICP Yowie. Good enough for government work. Snore stream. Were you snoring last time? When? Yeah, I was so tired. I think it was like I think I've been tour guiding, and it was like the last cold days, right? And I'd like 2 tours the days before, in just minus temperatures, and I was like, the crickets were screaming for help last time. Unfortunately, it didn't help them. I think they've been gobbled up. You call one of the Marys Mary, and the other Mary is Marigold. Well, which Mary is Mary? Is the Canadian Mary Mary, or is the Canadian Mary Marigold? American Mary and Canadian Mary. Where is Greek Mary? Our book club chose heated rivalry for our book this month. Is that bad? Is that bad? I don't know. You don't seem happy about it. Thanks for the cheer, Barbarian Hamster, by the way. And I appreciate that indeed. You're evil, Mary. Gin with extra juice, minapa. Tsutsumi. Fair enough, Alison. It's good to have standards. Hello, Jared. People wanted to read smut. Is it smutty? I mean, does it get smutty? I don't know. We have Sally, but she's 1 letter off. It's true. Sally is not Sally. Sally's not Sally. It's very smutty, is it? If only that was out of copyright. Hop Frog? Why have I got my bookmark at Hop Frog? Do we know what Hop Frog is? I'm just glancing through. I'm not going to start yet. There was a plink plink for the bartender. Thank you very much, Barbarian. Can't wait to hear male moans in my ear at work. That's okay to ask for people to wish you luck, Kettle Tanglefoot. That's fine. It seems like corn with a plot, but I might be wrong. Okay. I have poked Greek Mary. Whether she'll actually spawn is a different matter. Oh, 3 Marys in one go. Willem. You read anything? Have you read Cider House Rules? Good. Good luck. Good luck, take a Tanglefoot. Indeed. Go and nail it. Grab that job. It's yours. Be the one that they want. And that's it. So, okay, I've got a nice busy week this week. I don't know if anybody here is planning to come on Friday to the Improv, or even some of you might even be going to ACT, I believe, in which I'm not in, sadly. But Mark Cram is. Mr. Jobs himself. No, already we've got a hype train. Choo choo, choo choo. Get the hype train going. Love train. We're on a love train. Everybody in the world join hands. It's a love train. A love train. Hyped for ACT. You're going Santa Green. Cool. I'm very good, thank you, Jade. Yeah, ACT is fun. You have no one to go with. No one's coming from the gang this week. I know, Sally, but soon enough. 69% love train. Come on now, we can do this. What are we reading today, Mary? Canadian Mary? We are reading more Poe. Poe. Yeah. Oh, that sounds quite good, Alison. Wish they'd learn from it. You're flying in from America to watch. That's good. I like it. I like the dedication there. Well done. I know. I'm already yawning. Shit. What kind of fish? Small ones. I don't know what type. I just went to the shop and went, can I have some of those? Already got one of those little bottom feedery ones. And I said, what's good for that goes with these? And they went, these ones. Do I have a favorite French word? Merde. Smallmouth bass in the tank. Do you have any fish in your percolator though? In my coffee percolator? No, they die. Pick the fish off, vibes only. Okay, hang on, I'll show you. I think there's a picture on this. It's one of these little bloopers. Oh, it's the wrong lid, isn't it? Lids are being swapped on the pots. That's no good. People all over the world join hands. Don't get a name. Well, we've been talking about naming them. One of these. Whatever that is. Jade on a streak, loves it. Other French words that I like, papillon. Actually, I love the word butterfly. It's beautiful. Guachouk. What is that? Is that cabbage? Suckerfish. No, it's not a sucker as such. They're not ones that go. This one just kind of goes no, at the bottom. Rubber. That's rubber. That's the word for rubber. Shut up. That's ridiculous. That's the Corey catfish. Okay, cool. Nice to know. Well, there we go. Cute little thing. It's got 6.5% flies in this, apparently. So I'm not sure if that's good. Oh, I see. Oh, I do feed them. I do feed the little Corey. Um, there are some tops in there. There's two tops. Uh, yeah, they're good at cleaning. I've got a couple of snails for cleaning. Um, and stripy ones, and one of them died. I don't know why, but from somewhere, one of the horny snails appeared. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. I haven't done my research. If some of you are a bit more au fait with the my favourite thing is asking people with a thick Yorkshire accent to try and speak French. Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? Corey cats are nigh indestructible when the parents. Okay. Oh, okay. Are you not only are you a poe expert, Alison, but you happen to be a bit of a expert on the things. So what is it with the horny snail? Is the horny snail bad? Is it going to kill my other snails? Oh, what the hell? Why would you? Oh, nerite snail. All right. Is that bad? Does it matter? Is a nerite snail anything? Um. Oh, okay. Thank you, Prickly Triangle. Right, lurking back and say hi back. Horn snails are fine. I have five. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. It will breed them. I know that's the thing. There are lots of baby snails in there as well right now, and I'm like, uh, uh. I mean, otherwise they're happy. I need to the plants that are growing. I need to clear out some of the plants. You can probably see. I don't know how much of that tank you can see actually. Um, there's a lot of plant in that tank. It's mainly plant right now. Um, puffer fish. They eat 1 million snails each week. Do they now? Uh, assassin snails. What do assassin snails look like? Help me out here. First time chat. Hey, Ralad72. It's oh Adam. Hello, Adam. Um, well, actually, uh, if looked after, goldfish will live for decades apparently. But they also brown and yellow striped. Well, hang on a second. Procyon, thank you very much. Appreciate you. Assassin snails are brown and yellow coat. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. Um, yeah. Well, and yeah, that's the thing. Actually, even these fish can live for a long time. People don't realize. Um, you can't eat all snails though, ICP Yowie. And FYI, if anybody decides to eat snails, you must cook them. There's some fucking horrendous diseases you can get from what lives in the guts of snails. And people do it as a bet that every year people die. Teenagers normally, because they're like, well, we're eating snail. And then they eat it, and then they die because they get some horrible disease that rots their brain. Um, Yeah, exactly. They grow because it's the same family as the koi carp, so you can even see how big they fucking get. Um, do it. Um, they produce a lot of ammonia for that size tank. Huh? How about we don't eat snails? Why not? Why don't? Anything's good. Nice glass blower letter. Yeah, there we go. Monster Heart. Thank you very much. Loving it. Goldfish that was 15 years old growing up. I know, but then I remember think back to all those fish that we had, and I didn't know. I didn't know any better. And they didn't live that long. Used to get them at the fairground, you know. You play a game or you do some shooting thing and you could win a fucking goldfish. It's pretty grim. I'm swearing tonight. Um, no, no. Mango is pretty much ignorant of the world, apart from when he gets to have a walk and eat. So he's fine. They served as a prank to a table full of teenage American girls. No, it's the Czechs eat. You get it here as well. On occasionally on the menu, snails for sure. It's a very specific snail. It's the escargot. It's the big one, about yay big. Imagine something the size of half a kiwi. No, not even that. Less than that. Two big fat grapes. I don't know what's to describe it. Anyway, uh, fish and reptiles. Find snakes and was a big one to give. They are great. I've always liked them as well. If they don't get eaten, this is true. At the French port, yeah, exactly. Not everywhere. How do they taste? I'll admit I've never tried them. Or have I? I can't remember. Obviously not that memorable. And you just have them with a lot of garlic butter, so taste of garlic basically. An eighth of a blacksmith. An eighth of a blacksmith's. Do I have a favorite Czech meal? Oh, yeah, probably roast duck with cabbage and dumplings. I guess. I often have that. I'm at the pub, but I mean, I'm a sucker for goulash, but no, they don't really do it Hungarian style. Yeah. Um. Oh my god. I have this little garden plot I have access to, and it was obviously very very happy plot for snails, and I didn't want to kill them because there were. I'm not talking lying when I say there were hundreds of them. And I've got a photo on a phone somewhere, but you know whether I will ever retrieve it. Um, and so we just filled like a bucket of snails, and just took to the woods and let them out. So presumably they either alive or something ate them, like a very happy hedgehog stumbled across them that evening. Um, and then I found out that actually it was the little European snails, about the size somewhere between a blacksmith's little fingertip and a big fingertip. So they're black and yellow stripes or slightly greeny stripes, the striped ones, not the escargot. And I found out, I did some reading, and they do not eat your salad, those. They actually, unless they're really desperate, they're not going to go for fresh leaves. They prefer rotting material. So actually, they're cleaners. It's the escargot and the slugs. They'll go, I mean, slugs will eat anything, they'll eat each other, right? Um, yeah. What badge? Did someone need a badge? Oh. Ah. I know. Yeah, probably not. I know. My friend in England, where he grew up, there was an alleyway, and it was always full of dog shit. So you had to be careful, but the lights weren't there. But obviously, slugs and snails came to clean. So it was always crack, crack. And in England, there's always wet, so there's always snails. Well, slugs have their place. Everything's there for a reason. Um, yeah, yeah. They also very good at hiding, though, barbarian. Let me tell you a story of one time that I worked in this public house in England. That would be pub for those who are initiated in the English language. And every morning in that public house, on the carpet in the front bar, there would be trails of where obviously slugs had been going around, but nobody ever knew where they were. Hedgehogs are carnivorous, yes. Don't give them milk. Don't give them milk. Cat food, love it. Dog food, water. And basically, I was living at the pub at the time for a short while, and I had to go get up very early to go to work one day. And we're talking like 4:35 in the morning, right? And I go down to the bar, and basically, I'm looking at the bar, and I went to get myself some water, and there were all these tiger slugs, and they were about the size somewhere between a blacksmith's thumb and a blacksmith and a half's thumb, and I'd say there was a good 15 of them, and I was like proper grossed out. So what I did was I put soda water in a pint glass, and I banged the slugs in there, and they didn't like that, of course. And then they start floating around, and I went out the front door and I chucked them on the street, and the magpies and the jackdaws who were just waking up for their breakfast, they were like, "Open it, down we go," and ate them all up. And then there weren't any slugs in the bar after that. Is that cruel? Don't know. I don't know if I feel bad about that now I've shared it. Well, the magpies were happy. Not Kira, hello. Nom nom nom. Garden salt bucket. Yeah, my grandfather used to chop their heads off. When I was a kid, I found this old rusty knife blade somewhere in his garden. Like, it's a Roman knife. Of course, it wasn't, but it didn't matter. He put a handle on it, and he used that specific nice knife for beheading slugs. And what would he do with them, though? He would put them in a bucket, and they would go on the compost, and they would go back into the soil and feed his plants. It wasn't just melted. Thank you, ICPyawi. Not Kira. He'll go away. I need eye bleach. Why? What happened? Oh, to be a headless slug. The headless horseman. What was this story that I opened up here, though? We're not going to read it tonight because I think we're going to go for the second installment of Rue Morgue. 503. What is this? Hop frog. And it's about a king who likes joking. So, if I'm to understand correctly, the mystery of Marie Roger. Oh, Jesus, it's even longer. No, we can't do that tonight. Or we have to do it in two halves, gang. It's 40 pages. Oh. Because Rue Morgue was 28 pages, and I was falling asleep by the end of that. That one is a sequel to we read last time. Do we want to hack into that and do it in two parts? I guess we have to, don't we? We'll have a poem first. Yes, Jolly Hun. No, not 140 pages. 39 pages. It starts on page 169. It's a very fine number, that. Right? And finishes on 208. 69 pages, like, you know. A poem, though. A poem. A poem. Let me find 169. I forgot the number so quickly after having said it was such a wonderful number. 169. Oh, whoa, whoa, woe is me. Tamerlane, is that a poem? Is that a poem there, Tamerlane? Or is that a story? Oh god, auto mod, blah blah blah. It is a poem. I cannot find it, Alice. Tamerlane, 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 Tamerlane. No, I can't find it. What the? Ah, tell lies. 1005. 999. Page 999. Tamerlane. And we're back. What's that all about? What would it take to get me banned in Logan's chat? Well, if I was there and you insulted me, I think you'd definitely throw that straight away. All right, Tamerlane. We'll go over Tamerlane, and then we're going to hack through half of the story. Kind solace in a dying hour, such, Father, is not now my theme. I will not mildly deem that power of earth may shrive me of the sin, unearthly pride that revelled in. I have no time to dote or dream. You call it hope, that fire of fire. It is but agony of desire. If I can hope, O God, I can. Its fount is holier, more divine. I would not call thee fool, old man, but such is not a gift of thine. Thou know the secret of a spirit bowed from its wild pride into shame. Yearning heart, I did inherit thy withering portion with the fame, the searing glory which hath shone amid the jewels of my throne, hallow of hell. And with the pain, not hell, shall make me fear again. O craving heart for the lost flowers and sunshine of my summer hours, the undying voice of that dead time with its interminable chime rings in the spirit of a spell upon thy emptiness, a knell. I have not always been as now. The fevered diadem on my brow I claimed and won usurpingly. Hath not the same fierce Adam given Rome to the Caesar, this to me? The heritage of a kindly mind, and a proud spirit which has striven triumphantly with humankind. On mountain soil I first drew life, the mists of the Taglay have shed nightly their dews upon my head, and I believe the winged strife and tumult of the headlong air have nestled in my very hair. So late from heaven that dew it fell, mid dreams of an unholy night, upon me with a touch of hell, while the red flashing of the light from the clouds that hung like banners o'er appeared to my half-closing eye, the pageantry of monarchy, when the deep trumpet thunder's roar came hurriedly upon me, telling of human battle, where my voice, my own voice, silly child, was swelling. Oh, how my spirit would rejoice, and leap within me at the cry, the battle cry of victory. The rain came down upon my head unsheltered, and the heavy wind rendered me mad and deaf and blind. It was but man, I thought, who shed laurels upon me, and the rush, the torrent of the chilly air gurgled within my ear the crush of empires and the captive's prayer, the hum of suitors and the tone of flattery round a sovereign's throne. My passions from that hapless hour usurped a tyranny which men have deemed since I've reached to power my innate nature, be it so. But, Father, there lived one who, then in my boyhood, when their fire burned with a still intenser glow, for passion must with youth expire, e'en then, who knew this iron heart in woman's weakness had a part. I have no words, alas, to tell the loveliness of loving well, nor would I now attempt to trace the more than beauty of a face whose lineaments upon my mind are shadows on the unstable wind. Thus I remember having dwelt some page of early lore upon with loitering eye, till I have felt the letters with their meaning melt to fantasies with none. Oh, she was worthy of love. Love as in infancy was mine, 'twas such an angel minds above might envy. Her young heart the shrine on which my every hope and thought were incense, then a goodly gift. They were childish and upright, pure, as her own young example taught. Why did I leave it, and adrift trust the fire within for light? We grew in age and love together, roaming in the forest and the wild, my breast her shield in wintry weather, and when the friendly sunshine smiled, and she would mark the opening skies, I saw no heaven but in her eyes. Young love's first lesson is the heart. Amid that sunshine and those smiles, when from our little cares apart, and laughing at her girlish wiles, I'd throw me on her throbbing breast and pour my spirit out in tears. There was no need to speak the rest, no need to quiet any fears of her who asked no reason why, but turned on me her quiet eye. Yet more than worthy of the love my spirit struggled with and strove, when on the mountain peak alone ambition lent it a new tone. I had no being but in thee, the world, and all it did contain, in its earth, the air, the sea, its joy, its hot little pain. That was new pleasure, the ideal, dim vanities of dreams by night, and dimmer nothings which were real, shadows and more shadowy light, parted upon their misty wings, and so confusedly became thine image, and a name, a name. Two separate yet most intimate things. I was ambitious. Have you known the passion, Father? You have not. A cottager, I marked a throne of half the world as all my own, and murmured of such lowly lot, but just like any other dream. Upon the vapour of the dew my own had passed, did not the beam of beauty, which did while it threw the minute, the hour, the day, oppress my mind with double loveliness? We walked together on the crown of a high mountain which looked down, afar from its proud natural towers of rock and forest on the hills. The dwindled hills were girt with bowers and shouting with 1,000 rills. I spoke to her of power and pride, but mystically, in such guise that she might deem it naught beside the moment's converse. In her eyes I read, perhaps too carelessly, a mingled feeling with my own. The flush on her bright cheek to me seemed to become a queenly throne, too well that I should let it be light in the wilderness alone. I wrapped myself in grandeur then, and donned a visionary crown. Yet it was not that fantasy had thrown her mantle over me, but that, among the rabble, men, lion ambition is chained down, and crouches to a keeper's hand. Not so in deserts where the grand, the wild, the terrible conspire with their own breath to fan his fire. Look round thee now, on Samarcand. Is she not queen of earth? Her pride above all cities, in her hand their destinies, in all beside of glory which the world hath known. Stands she not nobly and alone? Falling, her veriest stepping stone shall form the pedestal of a throne. And who her sovereign? Timur, he whom the astonished people saw striding over empires haughtily, a diademed outlaw. Human love, thou spirit given on earth of all we hope in heaven, which fall'st into the soul like rain upon the Syric withered plain, and failing in thy power to bless, but leav'st the heart a wilderness. Idea, which bindest life around, with music of so strange a sound, and beauty of so wild a birth. Farewell, for I have won the earth. When hope, the eagle that towered, could see no cliff beyond him in the sky, his pinions were bent droopingly, and homeward turned his softened eye. 'Twas sunset. When the sun will part, there comes a sullenness of heart to him who still would look upon the glory of the summer sun. That soul will hate the evening mist, so often lovely, and will list to the sound of the coming darkness, known to those whose spirits hearken, as one who in a dream of night would fly, but cannot from a danger nigh. What though the moon, the white moon, shed all the splendour of her noon? Her smile is chilly, and her beam in that time of dreariness will seem so like you gather in your breath a portrait taken after death. And boyhood is a summer sun, whose waning is the dreariest one, for all we live to know is known, and all we seek to keep hath flown. Let life then, as the day flower, fall with the noonday beauty, which is all. I reached my home no more, for all had flown who made it so. I passed out from its mossy door, and though my tread was soft and low, a voice came from the threshold stone of one whom I had earlier known. Oh, I defy thee, hell, to show on beds of fire that burn below an humbler heart, a deeper woe. Father, I firmly do believe I know, for death who comes for me from regions of the blessed afar, when there is nothing to deceive, hath left his iron gate ajar, and rays of truth you cannot see are flashing through eternity. I do believe that Eblis hath a snare in every human path, as how, when in the holy grove I wondered of the idol love, and who daily scents his snowy wings with incense of burnt offerings, from the most unpolluted things, whose pleasant bowers are yet so riven above with trellised rays from heaven. No may shun, no tiniest fly, the lightning of his eagle eye. How was it that ambition crept, unseen amid the revels there, till growing bold, he laughed and leapt in the tangles of love's very hair? It's a really good poem. Hubris. Beware hubris. I can read anything that is not in copyright, basically. So if it's private work and you're happy for it to be read out, that works. But whoever wrote it needs to give permission. Good night, Halibut Jules. Reading Cato is a good choice, Alison. Thank you. I give you permission to read all of my tweets. That'll take a while there, hey? All right, so we're starting on 69. I mean, page 69. Oh. Good Jesus, there's a massive footnote. There's footnotes. I got all evening. It's a very Dadzig coded poem. Maybe. Yeah. So I'm just going to look ahead now from, let's say 70, because it's actually really only half a page. Boo, why didn't you say 69 again, Michael? And we go to page 207. Someone do the math here. 37 pages. What's half of 37? 34 and 33. Pochke, what are you talking out your ass, lad? Yeah, 37. 30, 34 and 33. I can't do maths. No, what am I talking about? 50. 19 and 18. Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? 18. Okay. Okay, it's back on. It's fine. I don't know why it does that. Uh, okay, so I'm going to read this footnote actually because it's kind of pertinent um, to. Let me see if I can make myself comfy in this. I'm not one for sitting cross-legged, but I am sat on this massive rattan poof thing. So let's see how this works out. Oh dear, cross-legged. I'm not made for this kind of flexibility. Shit. You all right? I'm all right. Are you all right? I'm just gonna get comfy back in the coach here. All right, I'm gonna read the footnote first. You hear me? Okay. A Michael-sized chair. This is pretty big. Just needs to get sorted out. All right, so here's a footnote. Upon the original publication of Marie Roger, the footnotes now appended were considered unnecessary, but the lapse of several years since the tragedy upon which the tale is based renders it expedient to give them, and also to say a few words in explanation of the general design. A young girl, Mary Cecilia Rogers, was murdered in the vicinity of New York, and although her death occasioned an intense and long enduring excitement, the mystery attending it had remained unsolved at the period when the present paper was written and published. Herein, under pretence of relating the fate of a Parisian grisette, the author has allowed in minute detail the essential, while merely paralleling the inessential facts of the real murder of Mary Rogers. Thus, all argument founded upon the fiction is applicable to the truth, and the investigation of the truth was the object. The mystery of Marie Roger was composed at a distance from the scene of the atrocity, and with no other means of investigation than the newspapers afforded. Thus, much escaped the writer, of which he could have availed himself had he been upon the spot and visited the localities. It may not be improper to record, nevertheless, that the confessions of two persons, one of them Madame Deluc of the narrative, made at different periods long subsequent to the publication, confirmed in full not only the general conclusion, but absolutely all the chief hypothetical details by which the conclusion was attained. Thank you. Well, apparently, probably now this is where Conan Doyle got his idea, isn't it? That's what you said, Alison, or was it Sally? Self-insert. He likes to insert himself into places, doesn't he? These are the ideal series of events which run parallel with the real ones. They rarely coincide. Men and circumstances generally modify the ideal train of events so that it seems imperfect, and its consequences are equally imperfect. Thus, with the Reformation, instead of Protestantism, came Lutheranism. There are few persons, even among the calmest thinkers, who have not occasionally been startled into a vague yet thrilling half-credence in the supernatural by coincidences of so seemingly marvellous a character that as mere for the half-credences of which I speak have never the full force of thought. Such sentiments are seldom thoroughly stifled, unless by reference to the doctrine of chance, or, as it is technically termed, the calculus of probabilities. Now, this calculus is, in its essence, purely mathematical, and thus we have the anomaly of the most rigidly exact in science applied to the shadow and spirituality of the most intangible in speculation. The extraordinary details which I am now called upon to make public will be found to form, as regards sequence of time, the primary branch of a series of scarcely intelligible coincidences whose secondary or concluding branch will be recognized by all readers in the late murder of Mary Cecilia Rogers at New York. When, in an article entitled The Murders in Rue Morgue, I endeavored about a year ago to depict some very remarkable features in the mental character of my friend, the Chevalier C. Augustin Dupin, it did not occur to me that I should ever resume the subject. This depicting of character constituted my design, and this design was thoroughly fulfilled in the wild train of circumstances brought to instance Dupin's idiosyncrasy. I might have adduced other examples, but I should have proven no more. Late events, however, in their surprising development, have startled me into some further details, which I will carry with them the air of extorted confession. Hearing what I have lately heard, it would be indeed strange should I remain silent in regard to what I both heard and saw so long ago. Upon the winding up of the tragedy involved in the deaths of Madame L'Espanaye and her daughter, the Chevalier dismissed the affair at once from his attention, and relapsed into his old habits of moody reverie. Prone at all times to abstraction, I readily fell in with his humour, and continuing to occupy our chambers in the Faubourg Saint-Germain, we gave the future to the winds, and slumbered tranquilly in the present, weaving the dull world around us into dreams. But these dreams were not altogether uninterrupted. It may be readily to be supposed that the part played by my friend in the drama of the Rue Morgue had not failed of its impression upon the fancies of the Parisian police. With its emissaries, the name of Dupin had grown into a household word. The simple character of those inductions by which he had disentangled the mystery never having been explained even to the prefect or to any other individual than myself, of course it is not surprising that the affair was regarded as little less than miraculous, or that the Chevalier's analytical abilities acquired for him the credit of intuition. His frankness would have led him to disabuse every inquiry of such prejudice, but his indolent humour forbade all further agitation of a topic whose interest to himself had long ceased. It thus happened that he found himself the cynosure of the policial eyes, and the cases were not few in which attempt was made to engage his services at the prefecture. One of the most remarkable instances was that of the murder of a young girl named Marie Roget. This event occurred about 2 years after the atrocity in the Rue Morgue. Marie, whose Christian and family name will at once arrest attention from their resemblance to those of the unfortunate. The father had died during the child's infancy, and from the period of his death until within 18 months before the assassination which forms the subject of our narrative, the mother and daughter had dwelled together in the Rue Pavée Saint-André, Madame there keeping a pension, assisted by Marie. Affairs went on thus until the latter had attained her 22nd year, when her great beauty attracted the notice of a perfumer, who occupied one of the shops in the basement of the Palais Royal, and whose custom lay chiefly among the desperate adventurers infesting that neighbourhood. Monsieur Leblanc was not unaware of the advantages to be derived from the attendance of the fair Marie in his perfumery, and his liberal proposals were accepted eagerly by the girl, although with somewhat more hesitation by Madame. The anticipations of the shopkeeper were realized, and his rooms soon became notorious through the charms of the sprightly grisette. She had been in his employ about a year, when her admirers were thrown into confusion by her sudden disappearance from the shop. Monsieur Leblanc was unable to account for her absence, and Madame Roget was distracted with anxiety and terror. The public papers immediately took up the theme, and the police were upon the point of making serious investigations, when, one fine morning after the lapse of a week, Marie, in good health, but with somewhat saddened air, made her reappearance at her usual counter in the perfumery. All inquiry,
except that of a private character, was, of course, immediately hushed. Monsieur Leblanc professed total ignorance as before. Marie, with Madame, replied to all questions that the last week had been spent at the house of a relation in the country. And thus the affair died away, and was generally forgotten, for the girl, ostensibly to relieve herself from the impertinence of curiosity, soon bade a final adieu to the perfumer, and sought the shelter of her mother's residence in the Rue Pavée Saint-André. It was about 5 months after this return home that her friends were alarmed by her sudden disappearance for a second time. 3 days elapsed, and nothing was heard of her. On the fourth, her corpse was found floating in the Seine, near the shore which is opposite to the quartier of Rue Saint-André, and at a point not very distant from the secluded neighborhood of the Barrière du Roule. The atrocity of this murder, for it was at once evidence that the murder had been committed, the youth and beauty of the victim, and above all her previous notoriety, conspired to produce intense excitement in the minds of the sensitive Parisians. I can call to mind no similar occurrence producing so general and so intense an effect. For several weeks, in the discussion of this one absorbing theme, even the momentous political topics of the day were forgotten. The prefect made usual exertions, and the powers of the whole Parisian police were, of course, tasked to the utmost extent. Upon the first discovery of the corpse, it was not supposed that the murderer would be able to elude, for more than a very brief period, the inquisition which was immediately set on foot. It was not until the expiration of a week that it was deemed necessary to offer a reward, and even then this reward was limited to 1,000 francs. In the meantime, the investigation proceeded with vigor, if not always with judgment, and numerous individuals were examined to no purpose, while, owing to the continual absence of all clue to the mystery, the popular excitement greatly increased. At the end of the 10th day, it was thought advisable to double the sum originally proposed, and at length, the second week having elapsed without leading to any discoveries, and the prejudice which always exists in Paris against the police having given vent to itself in several serious émeutes, the prefect took it upon himself to offer the sum of 20,000 francs for the conviction of the assassin, or, if more than one should be proved to have been implicated, for the conviction of any one of the assassins. In the proclamation setting forth this reward, a full pardon was promised to any accomplice who should come forward in evidence against his fellows, and to the whole was appended, wherever it appeared, the private placard of a committee of citizens offering 10,000 francs in addition to the amount proposed by the prefecture. The entire reward thus stood at no less than 30,000 francs, which will be regarded as an extraordinary sum when we consider the humble condition of the girl and the great frequency in large cities of such atrocities as the one described. No one doubted now that the mystery of this murder could be immediately brought to light, but although in one or two instances arrests were made with promised elucidation, yet nothing was elicited which would implicate the parties suspected, and they were discharged forthwith. Strange as it may appear, the third week from the discovery of the body had passed, and passed without any light being thrown upon the subject, before even a rumour of the events which had so agitated the public mind reached the ears of Dupin and myself. Engaged in researches which had absorbed our whole attention, it had been nearly a month since either of us had gone abroad or received a visitor, or more than glanced at the leading political articles in one of the daily papers. The first intelligence of the murder was brought to us by G in person. He called upon us early in the afternoon of the 13th of July, 18th, and remained with us until late in the night. He had been piqued by the failure of all of his endeavours to ferret out the assassins. His reputation, so he said with a peculiar Parisian air, was at stake. Even his honour was concerned. The eyes of the public were upon him, and there was really no sacrifice which he would not be willing to make for the development of the mystery. He concluded a somewhat droll speech with a compliment, upon which he was pleased to term the tact of Dupin, and made him a direct and certainly a liberal proposition, the precise nature of which I did not feel myself at liberty to disclose, which has no bearing upon the proper subject of my narrative. The compliment my friend rebutted as best he could, but the proposition he accepted at once, although its advantages were altogether provisional. This point being settled, the prefect broke forth at once into explanations of his own views, interspersing them with long comments upon the evidence, of which latter we were not yet in possession. He discoursed much, and beyond doubt learnedly, while I hazarded an occasional suggestion as the night wore drowsily away. Dupin, sitting steadily in his accustomed armchair, was the embodiment of a respectful attention. He wore spectacles during the whole interview, and an occasional glance beneath their green glasses sufficed to convince me that he slept not the less soundly because silently, throughout the 7 or 8 leaden-footed hours which immediately preceded the departure of the prefect. In the morning, I procured at the prefecture a full report of all the evidence elicited, and at the various newspaper offices a copy of every paper in which, from first to last, had been published any decisive information in regard to this sad affair. Freed from all that was positively disproved, this mass of information stood thus. Hi, fluffy blue kittens.
Yeah, it's pretty good actually. The chair, that is. The story's pretty good as well. Sorry, I need to take a drink, folks. A lot of reading. This chair is a struggle. It is a struggle. You kind of either have to curl up in it or not. But anyway. Have fun with Alan Wake. Marie Roger left the residence of her mother in the Rue Pavée Saint-André about 9 o'clock in the morning of Sunday, June the 22nd in 18 something. In going out, she gave notice to a Monsieur Jacques Saint-Eustache, and to him only of her intention to spend the day with an aunt who resided in the Rue des Drômes. The Rue des Drômes is a short and narrow but populous thoroughfare, not far from the banks of the river, and at the distance of some 2 miles in the most direct course possible from the pension of Madame Rocher. Saint-Eustache was the accepted suitor of Marie, and lodged, as well as took his meals, at the pension. He was to have gone for his betrothed at dusk, and to have escorted her home. In the afternoon, however, it came on to rain heavily, and supposing that she would remain all night at her aunt's, as she had done under similar circumstances before, he did not think it necessary to keep his promise. As night drew on, Madame Roger, who was an infirm old lady, 70 years of age, was heard to express a fear that she should never see Marie again. But this observation attracted little attention at the time. On Monday it was ascertained that the girl had not been to the Rue des Drômes, and when the day elapsed without tidings of her, a tardy search was instituted at several points in the city and its environs. It was not, however, until the 4th day from the period of her disappearance that anything satisfactory was ascertaining respecting her. On this day, Wednesday, the 25th of June, a Monsieur Beauvais, who, with a friend, had been making inquiries for Marie near the Barrière du Roule, on the shore of the Seine, which is opposite to the Rue Pavée Saint-André, was informed that a corpse had just been towed ashore by some fishermen who had found it floating in the river. Upon seeing the body, Beauvais, after some hesitation, identified it as that of the perfumery girl.
His friend recognized it more promptly. The face was suffused with dark blood, some of which issued from the mouth. No foam was seen, as in the case of the merely drowned. There was no discoloration in the cellular tissue. About the throat were bruises and impressions of fingers. The arms were bent over on the chest and were rigid. The right hand was clenched, the left partially open. On the left wrist were two circular excoriations, apparently the effect of ropes or of a rope in more than one volution. A part of the right wrist also was much chafed, as well as the back throughout its extent, but more especially at the shoulder blades. In bringing the body to the shore, the fishermen had attached it to a rope, but none of the excoriations had been affected by this. The flesh of the neck was much swollen. There were no cuts apparent, or bruises which appeared to be the effect of blows. A piece of lace was found tied so tightly around the neck as to be hidden from sight. It was completely buried in the flesh, and was fastened by a knot which lay just under the left ear. This alone would have sufficed to produce death. The medical testimony spoke confidently of the virtuous character of the deceased. She had been subjected, it was said, to brutal violence. The corpse was in such condition when found there could have been no difficulty in its recognition by friends. The dress was much torn and otherwise disordered. In the outer garment a slip, about a foot wide, had been torn upward from the bottom hem to the waist, but not torn off. It was wound 3 times around the waist, and secured by a sort of hitch in the back. The dress immediately beneath the frock was of fine muslin, and from this a slip 18 inches wide had been torn entirely, torn very evenly and with great care. It was found around her neck, fitting loosely and secured with a hard knot. Over this muslin slip and the slip of lace, the strings of a bonnet were attached, the bonnet being appended. The knot by which the strings of the bonnet were fastened was not a lady's, but a slip or a sailor's knot. After the recognition of the corpse, it was not, as usual, taken to the morgue, this formality being superfluous, but hastily interred not far from the spot at which it was brought ashore. Through the exertions of Beauvais, the matter was industriously hushed up as far as possible, and several days had elapsed before any public emotion resulted. A weekly paper, however, at length took up the theme. The corpse was disinterred and re-examination instituted, but nothing was elicited beyond what was already noted. The clothes, however, were now submitted to the mother and friends of the deceased and fully identified as those worn by the girl upon leaving home. Meantime, the excitement increased hourly. Several individuals were arrested and discharged. St. Eustace fell especially under suspicion, and he failed at first to give an intelligible account of his whereabouts during the Sunday on which Marie left home. Subsequently, however, he submitted to Monsieur G affidavits accounting satisfactorily for every hour of the day in question. As time passed and no discovery ensued, 1,000 contradictory rumors were circulated, and the journalists busied themselves in suggestions. Among these, the one which attracted the most notice was the idea that Marie Roget still lived, and that the corpse found in the Seine was that of some other unfortunate. It will be proper that I submit to the reader some passages which embody the suggestion alluded to. These passages are literal translations from the L'Étoile, a paper conducted in general with much ability. Mademoiselle Roget left her mother's house on Sunday morning, June the 20th, with the ostensible purpose of going to see her aunt or some other connection in the Rue de Rome. From that hour, nobody is proved to have seen her. There is no trace or tidings of her at all. There has no person, however, come forward so far who saw her at all on that day after she left her mother's house. Now, though we have no evidence that Marie Roget was in the land of the living after 9 o'clock on Sunday, June the 22nd, we have proof that, up to that hour, she was alive. On Wednesday at 12 noon, a female body was discovered afloat on the shore of the Barrière du Roule. This was, even if we presume that Marie Roget was thrown into the river within 3 hours after she left her mother's house, only 3 days from the time she left her home. 3 days to an hour. But it is folly to suppose that the murder, if murder was committed on her body, could have been consummated soon enough to have enabled her murderers to throw the body into the river before midnight. Those who are guilty of such horrid crimes choose darkness rather than light. Thus we see that if the body found in the river was that of Marie Roget, it could have only been in the water 2.5 days or 3 at the outside. All experience has shown that drowned bodies, or bodies thrown into the water immediately after death by violence, require from 6 to 10 days for sufficient decomposition to take place to bring them to the top of the water. Even where a cannon is fired over a corpse and it rises before at least 5 or 6 days immersion, it sinks again if let alone. Now we ask, what was there in this case to cause the departure from the ordinary course of matter? If the body had been kept in its man. Okay. And furthermore, it is if the body had been kept in its mangled state on shore until Tuesday night, some trace will be found on the shore of the murderers. It is a doubtful point also whether the body would be so soon afloat, even if it were thrown in after having been dead 2 days. And furthermore, it is exceedingly improbable that any villains who had committed such a murder as it is here supposed would have thrown the body in without weight to sink it, when such a precaution could have so easily been taken. The editor here proceeds to argue that the body must have been in the water not 3 days merely, but at least 5 times 3 days, because it was so far decomposed that Beauvais had great difficulty in recognizing it. This latter point, however, was fully disproved. I continue the translation. What then are the facts in which Monsieur Beauvais says that he has no doubt that the body was that of Marie Roget? He ripped up the gown sleeve and says he found marks which satisfied him of the identity. The public generally supposed these marks to have been consistent of some description of scars. He rubbed the arm and found hair upon it, something as indefinite, we think, as can readily be imagined, as little conclusive as finding an arm in the sleeve. Monsieur Beauvais did not return that night, but sent word to Madame Rocher at 7 o'clock on Wednesday evening that an investigation was still in progress respecting her daughter. If we allow that Madame Roger, from her age and grief, could not go over, which is allowing a great deal, there certainly must have been some one who would have thought it worth the while to go over and attend the investigation, if they thought the body was that of Marie. Nobody went over. There was nothing said or heard about the matter of Rue Pavée Saint-André that reached even the occupants of the same building. Monsieur Saint-Eustache, the lover and intended husband of Marie, who boarded in her mother's house, deposes that he did not hear of the discovery of the body of his intended until the next morning, when Mr. Beauvais came into his chamber and told him of it. For an item of news like this, it strikes us that it was very coolly received. Did you lose me again? Okay. In this way, the journal endeavored to create the impression of an apathy on the part of the relatives of Marie, consistent with the supposition that these relatives believed the corpse to be hers. Its insinuations amount to this, that Marie, with the connivance of her friends, had absented herself from the city for reasons involving a charge against her chastity, and that these friends, upon the discovery of a corpse in the Seine, somewhat resembling that of the girl, had availed themselves of the opportunity to impress the public with the belief of her death. But L'Etoile was again over hasty. It was distinctly proved that no apathy, such as it was imagined, existed. That the old lady was exceedingly feeble and so agitated as to be unable to attend to any duty, that Saint Eustache so far from receiving the news coolly, was distracted with grief, and bore himself so frantically that Monsieur Beauvais prevailed upon a friend and a relative to take charge of him and prevent his attending the examination at the disinterment. Moreover, although it was stated by L'Etoile that the corpse was reinterred at the public expense, that an advantageous offer of a private sepulture was absolutely declined by the family, and that no member of the family attended the ceremonial, although I say all this was asserted by L'Etoile in furtherance of the impression it designed to convey, yet all this was satisfactorily disproved. In a subsequent number of the paper, an attempt was made to throw suspicion upon Beauvais himself. The editor says, "Now, then, a change comes over the matter. We are told that on one occasion, while Madame B was at Madame Roget's house, Monsieur Beauvais, who was going out, told her that a gendarme was expected there, and that she, Madame B, must not say anything to the gendarme until he returned, but let the matter be for him. In the present posture of affairs, Monsieur Beauvais appears to have the whole matter locked up in the head. A single step cannot be taken without Mr. Beauvais, for go which way you will, you run against him. For some reason, he determined that nobody shall have anything to do with the proceedings but himself, and he has elbowed the male relatives out of the way, according to their representations, in a very singular manner. He seems to be very much averse to permitting the relative to see the body." By the following fact, some colour was given to the suspicion thus thrown upon Beauvais. A visitor at his office a few days prior to the girl's disappearance, and during the absence of its occupant, had observed a rose in the keyhole of the door, and the name Marie inscribed upon a slate which hung near at hand. The general impression, so far as we were unable to glean it from the newspapers, seemed to be that Marie had been the victim of a gang of desperadoes, that by these she had been borne across the river, maltreated, and murdered. Le Commerciel, however, a print of extensive influence, was earnest in combating this popular idea. I quote a passage or two from its columns. "We are persuaded that pursuit has hitherto been on the false scent, so far as it has been directed to the Barrière du Roule. It is impossible that a person so well known to the thousands as this young woman was should have passed 3 blocks without some one having seen her, and anyone who saw her would have remembered it, for she interested all who knew her. It was when the streets were full of people when she went out. It is impossible that she could have gone to the Barrière du Roule or to the Rue de Drôme without being recognized by a dozen persons, yet no one has come forward who saw her outside her mother's door, and there is no evidence except the testimony concerning her expressed intentions that she did go out at all. Her gown was torn, bound around her, and tied, and by that the body was carried as a bundle. If the murder had been committed at the Barrière du Roule, there would have been no necessity for such arrangement. The fact that the body was found floating near the Barrière is no proof as to where it was thrown into the water. A piece of one of the unfortunate girl's petticoats, 2 feet long and 1 foot wide, was torn out and tied under her chin around the back of her head, probably to prevent screams, and this was done by fellows who had no pocket handkerchief. A day or two before the prefect called upon us, however, some important information reached the police, which seemed to overthrow at least the chief portion of Le Commerciel's argument. 2 small boys, sons of a Madame Duluc, while roaming among the woods near the Barrière du Roule, chanced to penetrate a close thicket, within which were 3 or 4 large stones, forming a kind of seat with a back and a footstool. On the upper stone lay a white petticoat, on the second a silk scarf. A parasol, gloves, and a pocket handkerchief were also found here. The handkerchief bore the name Marie Roget. Fragments of dress were discovered on the brambles around. The earth was trampled, the bushes were broken, and there was every evidence of a struggle there. Between the thicket and the river, the fences were found taken down, and the ground bore evidence of some heavy burthen having been dragged along it. A weekly paper, Le Soleil, had the following comments upon this discovery, comments which merely echoed the sentiment of the whole Parisian press. The things had all evidently been there at least 3 or 4 weeks, They were all mildewed down hard with the action of the rain, and stuck together from mildew. The grass had grown around them and over some of them. The silk on the parasol was strong, but the threads of it were run together within. The upper part, where it had been doubled and folded, was all mildewed and rotten, and tore on its being opened. The pieces of her frock torn out by the bushes were about 3 inches wide and 6 inches long. One part was the hem of the frock, and had been mended. The other piece was part of the skirt, not the hem. They looked like strips torn off, and were on a thorn bush about a foot from the ground. There could be no doubt, therefore, that the spot of this appalling outrage has been discovered. Consequent upon this discovery, new evidence appeared. Madame de Luc testified that she keeps a roadside inn not far from the bank of the river, opposite the Barrière de Roule. The neighbourhood is secluded, particularly so. It is the usual Sunday resort of blackguards from the city who cross the river in boats. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon of the Sunday in question, a young girl arrived at the inn, accompanied by a young man of dark complexion. The two remained here for some time. On their departure, they took the road to some thick woods in the vicinity. Madame de Luc's attention was called to the dress worn by the girl, on account of its resemblance to one worn by a deceased relative. A scarf was particularly noticed. Soon after the departure of the couple, a gang of miscreants made their appearance, behaved boisterously, ate and drank without making payment, followed in the route of the young man and girl, returned to the inn about dusk, and recrossed the river as if in great haste. It was soon after dark upon the same evening that Madame de Luc, as well as her eldest son, heard the screams of a female in the vicinity of the inn. The screams were violent, but brief. Madame D. recognized not only the scarf which was found in a thicket, but the dress which was discovered upon the corpse. An omnibus driver, Valence, now also testified that he saw Marie Roget cross a ferry on the Seine on the Sunday in question, in company with a young man of dark complexion. He, Valence, knew Marie, and could not be mistaken in her identity. The articles found in the thicket were fully identified by the relatives of Marie. The items of evidence and information thus collected by myself from the newspapers at the suggestion of Dupin embraced only one more point, but this was a point of seemingly vast consequence. It appears that immediately after the discovery of the clothes, as described above, the lifeless, or nearly lifeless body of Saint Eustache, Marie's betrothed, was found in the vicinity of what all now suppose to be the scene of the outrage. A phial labelled laudanum was emptied and was found near him. His breath gave evidence of the poison. He died without speaking. Upon his person was found a letter briefly stating his love for Marie, with his design of self-destruction. "I need scarcely tell you," said Dupin, as he finished the perusal of my notes, "that this is a far more intricate case than that of the Rue Morgue, from which it differs in one important respect. This is an ordinary, although an atrocious, instance of crime. There is nothing peculiar outre about it. You will observe for this reason that the mystery has been considered easy, when for this reason it should have been considered difficult of solution. Thus, at first, it was thought as necessary to offer a reward. The myrmidons of G were able at once to comprehend how and why and such an atrocity might have been committed. They could picture to their imagination a mode, many modes, and a motive, many motives, and because it was not impossible that either of these numerous modes and motives could have been the actual one, they have taken it for granted that one of them must. But the ease with which these variable fancies were entertained, and the very plausibility with each assumed, should have been understood as indicative rather of the difficulties than of the facilities which must attend elucidation. I have therefore observed that it is by prominences above the plane of the ordinary that reason feels her way, if at all, in her search for the true, and that the proper question in cases such as this is not so much what has occurred as what has occurred that has never occurred before. In the investigations of the house of Madame L'Espanaye, The agents of G were discouraged and confounded by the very unusualness which to a proper regulated intellect would have afforded the surest sense of omen of success, while this same intellect might have plunged in despair at the ordinary character of all that met the eye in the case of the perfumery girl, and yet told of nothing but easy triumph to the functionaries of the prefecture. In the case of Madame L'Espanaye and her daughter, there was, even at the beginning of our investigation, no doubt that the murder had been committed. The idea of suicide was excluded at once. Here, too, we are freed at the commencement from all supposition of self-murder. The body found at the Barrier de Roule was found under such circumstances as to leave us no room for embarrassment upon this important point. But it has been suggested that the corpse discovered is not that of the Marie Roget, for the conviction of whose assassin or assassins the reward is offered, and respecting whom solely our agreement has been arranged with the prefect. We both know this gentleman well. It will not do to trust him too far. If dating our inquiries from the body found and then tracing a murderer, we yet discover this body to be that of some other individual than Marie, or if starting from the living Marie we find her yet to find her unassassinated, in either case we lose our labor, since it is Monsieur G with whom we have to deal. For our own purpose, therefore, if not for the purpose of justice, it is indispensable that our first step should be the determination of the identity of the corpse with the Marie Roget who is missing. With the public arguments of L'Etoile have had weight, and that the journal itself is convinced of their importance, would appear from the manner in which it commences one of its essays upon the subject. Several of the morning papers of the day, it says, speak of the conclusive article in Monday's Etoile. To me, this article appears conclusive of little beyond the zeal of its editor. We should bear in mind that in general it is the object of our newspapers rather to create a sensation, to make a point, than to further the cause of truth. The latter end is only pursued when it seems coincident with the former. The print which merely falls in with the ordinary opinion, however well founded this opinion may be, earns for itself no credit with the mob. The mass of the people regard as profound only him who suggests pungent contradictions of the general idea. In ratiocination, not less than in literature, it is the epigram which is the most immediately and most universally appreciated. In both, it is of the lowest order of merit. What I mean to say is that it is the mingled epigram and the melodrama of the idea that Marie Roget still lives, rather than any true plausibility in this idea, which have suggested it to L'Etoile, and secured it a favorable reception with the public. Let us examine the heads of this journal's argument, endeavoring to avoid the incoherence with which it is originally set forth. Hello, Dashi Live. The first aim of the saying this is a murder story, and the murder of Marie Roget, and they're just going through the newspapers right now. So, the first aim of the writer is to show, from the brevity of the interval between Marie's disappearance and the finding of the floating corpse, that this corpse cannot be that of Marie. The reduction of this interval to its smallest possible dimension becomes thus at once an object with the smallest possible dimension. Oh, crike, I lost my place. An object with the reasoner. In the rash pursuit of this object, he rushes into mere assumption at the outset. It is folly to suppose, he says, that the murder got away with the notifications.
It is folly to suppose, he says, that the murder, if murder was committed on her body, should have been consummated soon enough to have enabled her murderers to throw the body into the river before midnight. We demand at once, and very naturally, why. Why is it folly to suppose that the murder was committed within 5 minutes after the girl's quitting her mother's house? Why is it folly to suppose that the murder was committed at any given period of the day? There have been assassinations at all hours, but had the murder taken place at any moment between 9 o'clock in the morning of Sunday and a quarter before midnight, there would still have been enough time to throw the body into the river before midnight. This assumption, then, amounts precisely to this, that the murder was not committed on Sunday at all, and if we allow Etoile to assume this, we may permit it any liberties whatever. The paragraph beginning, "It is folly to suppose that the murderer, etc., etc., however it appears as printed in L'Etoile, may be imagined to have existed actually thus in the brain of its inditor. It is folly to suppose that the murder, if murder was committed on the body, could have been committed soon enough to have enabled her murderers to throw the body into the river before midnight. It is folly, we say, to suppose all this, and to suppose at the same time, as we are resolved to suppose, that the body was not thrown in until after midnight. A sentence sufficiently inconsequential in itself, but not so utterly preposterous as the one printed. Were it my purpose, continued Dupin, merely to make out a case against this passage of L'Etoile's argument, I might safely leave it where it is. It is not, however, with L'Etoile that we have to do, but with the truth. The sentence in question has but one meaning as it stands, and this meaning I have fairly stated. But it is material that we go behind the mere words, for an idea which these words have obviously intended and failed to convey. It was the design of the journalist to say that at whatever period of the day or night of Sunday this murder was committed, it was improbable that the assassins would have ventured to bear the corpse to the river before midnight. And herein lies, really, the assumption of which I complain. It is assumed that the murder was committed at such a position and under such circumstances that the bearing it to the river became necessary. Now, the assassination might have taken place upon the river's bank, or in the river. Can you hear me? It says it's disconnected. What the fuck is saying it's disconnected? What's wrong with the connection? I don't know. It's been like this all night, on and off. You will understand that I suggest nothing here as probable or as coincident with my own opinion. My design so far is no reference to the facts of the case. I wish merely to caution you against the whole tone of L'Etoile's suggestion by calling your attention to its ex parte character at the outset. Having prescribed thus a limit to suit its own preconceived notions, having assumed that if this were the body of Marie, it could have been in the water but a very brief time, the journal goes on to say, all experience has shown that drowned bodies or bodies thrown into the water immediately after death by violence require from 6 to 7 days to 10 days for sufficient decomposition to take place to bring them to the top of the water. Even when a cannon is fired over a corpse and it rises before at least 5 to 6 days immersion, it sinks again if let alone. Now, these assertions have been tacitly received by every paper in Paris, with the exception of Le Moniteur. This latter print endeavors to combat that portion of the paragraph which is referenced to drowned bodies, only by citing some 5 or 6 instances in which the bodies of individuals known to be drowned were found floating after the lapse of less time than is insisted upon by L'Etoile. But there is something excessively unphilosophical in the attempt on the part of Le Moniteur to rebut the general assertion of L'Etoile by a citation of particular instances militating against that assertion. Had it been possible to adduce 50 instead of 5 examples of bodies found floating at the end of 2 or 3 days, these 50 examples could still have been properly regarded only as exceptions to L'Etoile's rule, until such time as the rule itself should be confuted. Admitting the rule, and this Le Moniteur does not deny, insisting merely upon its exceptions, the argument of L'Etoile is suffered to remain in full force. For this argument does not pretend to involve more than a question of the probability of the body having risen to the surface in less than 3 days. And this probability will be in favor of L'Etoile's position until the instances so childishly adduced should be sufficient in number to an established antagonistical rule. You will see at once that all argument upon this head should be urged, if at all, against the rule, and for this end we must examine the rationale of the rule. Now, the human body in general is neither much lighter nor much heavier than the water of the Seine. That is to say, the specific gravity of the human body in its natural condition is about equal to the bulk of fresh water which it displaces. The bodies of fat and fleshy persons with small bones, and of women generally, are lighter than those of the lean and large-boned and of men. And the specific gravity of the water of a river is somewhat influenced by the presence of the tide from the sea, but leaving this tide out of the question, it may be said that very few human bodies will sink at all, even in fresh water, of their own accord. Almost anyone falling into a river will be unable to float, if he suffer the specific gravity of the water fairly to be adduced in comparison with his own. That is to say, if he suffer his whole person to be immersed with as little exception as possible. The proper position for one who cannot swim is the upright position of the walker on land, with the head thrown fully back and immersed, the mouth and nostrils alone remaining above the first surface. Thus circumstanced, we shall find that we float without difficulty and without exertion. It is evident, however, that the gravities of the body and the bulk of the water displaced are very nicely balanced, and that a trifle will cause either to preponderate. An arm, for instance, uplifted from the water and thus deprived of its support, is an additional weight sufficient to immerse the whole head, while the accidental aid of the smallest piece of timber will enable us to elevate the head so as to look about. Now, in the struggles of one unused to swimming, the arms are invariably thrown upward when an attempt is made to keep the head in its usual perpendicular position. And the result is the immersion of the mouth and the nostrils, and the inception during efforts to breathe while beneath the surface of water into the lungs. Much is also received into the stomach, and the whole body becomes heavier by the difference between the weight of the air originally distending these cavities and that of the liquid which now fills them. This difference is sufficient to cause the body to sink as a general rule, but is insufficient in the cases of individuals with small bones and an abnormal quantity of flaccid or fatty matter. Such individuals float even after drowning. The corpse, being supposed at the bottom of the river, will remain there until by some means its specific gravity again becomes less than the bulk of the water which it displaces. This effect is brought about by decomposition or otherwise. The result of decomposition is the general generation of gas, distending the cellular tissues and all the cavities and giving the puffed appearance which is so horrible. When this distension has so far progressed that the bulk of the corpse is materially increased without a corresponding increase of mass or weight, its specific gravity becomes less than that of the water displaced, and it forthwith makes its appearance at the surface. But the decomposition is modified by innumerable circumstances, is hastened or retarded by innumerable agencies, for example, by the heat or the cold of the season, by the mineral impregnation of the purity of the water, by its depth,
or shallowness by its currency or stagnation, by the temperament of the body, by its infection or freedom from disease before death. Thus, it is evident that we can assign no period with anything like accuracy at which the corpse shall rise through decomposition. Under certain conditions, this result would be brought about within an hour. Under others, it might not take place at all. There are chemical infusions by which the animal frame can be preserved forever from corruption. The bichloride of mercury is one. But apart from decomposition, there may be, and very usually is, a generation of gas within the stomach from the acetous fermentation of vegetable matter, or within other cavities from other causes, sufficient to induce a distension which will bring the body to the surface. The effect produced by the firing of a cannon is that of simple vibration. This may either loosen the corpse from the soft mud or ooze in which it is embedded, thus permitting it to rise when other agencies have already prepared it for so doing, or it may overcome the tenacity of some putrescent portions of the cellular tissue while allowing the cavities to distend under the influence of gas. Having thus before us is the whole philosophy of this subject. We can easily test it by the assertions of L'Etoile. All experience shows, says this paper, that drowned bodies, or bodies thrown into the water immediately after death by violence, require from 6 to 10. Damn it. Fuck. Oh my god, what is it with this fucking connection? Uh, well, thanks for that. Pin quote sponsored by Mrs. Dadzig. Right, that's about right. Oh god. Anyway, let's get through this next 5 pages or so, eh? Luke is a human Faraday cage. Is he? I've actually got a lot of static as well. Excuse me for the burp then. Oh, we talked about this before when I got flocked. Where, when I got Monster Heart. Oh my god! Thank you. Thank you for the subs. Um, uh, we're back to L'Etoile talking about floating bodies. Ha! The whole of this paragraph must now appear tissue of inconsequence and incoherence. All experience does not show that drowned bodies require from 6 to 10 days for sufficient decomposition to take place to bring them to the surface. Both science and experience show that the period of this rising is and necessarily must be indeterminate. If, moreover, a body has risen to the surface through firing of a cannon, it will not sink again if let alone until decomposition has so far progressed as to permit the escape of the generated gas. But I wish to call your attention to the distinction which is made between drowned bodies and the bodies thrown into the water immediately after death by violence. Although the writer admits the distinction, yet he includes them all in the same category. I've shown how it is that the body of a drowning man becomes specifically heavier than its bulk of water, and that he would not sink at all except for the struggle by which he elevates his arms above the surface, and his gasps for breath while beneath the surface, gasps which supply by water the place of the origin of air in the lungs. But these struggles and these gasps would not occur in the body thrown into the water immediately after death by violence. Thus, in the latter instance, the body, as a general rule, would not sink at all, a fact of which L'Etoile is evidently ignorant. When decomposition had proceeded to a very great extent, when the flesh had in a great measure left the bones, then indeed, but not till then, should we lose sight of the corpse. And now, what are we to make of the argument that the body found could not be that of Marie Roget, because 3 days only having elapsed, this body was found floating? If drowned, being a woman, she might never have sunk, or having sunk, might have reappeared 24 hours or less. But no one supposes her to have been drowned, and dying before being thrown into the river, she might have been found floating at any period afterwards, whatever. But, says the L'Etoile, if the body had been kept in its mangled state on shore until Tuesday night, some trace would have been found of the shore of the murderers. Here it is at first difficult to perceive the intention of the reasoner. He means to anticipate what he imagines would be an objective as his theory, viz., that the body was kept on shore 2 days, suffering rapid decomposition, more rapid than if immersed in the water. He supposes, had this been the case, it might have appeared at the surface on Wednesday, and thinks that only under such circumstances it could have so appeared. He is accordingly in haste to show that it was not kept on shore, for if so, some trace would be found on the shore of the murderers. I presume you smile at the sequitur. You cannot be made to see how the mere duration of the corpse on the shore could operate to multiply traces of the assassins, nor can I. And furthermore, it is exceedingly improbable, continues our journal, that any villains who had committed such a murder as is here supposed would have thrown the body in without wait to sink it, when such a precaution could have so easily been taken. Observe here the laughable confusion of thought. No one, not even L'Etoile, disputes the murder committed on the body found. The marks of violence are too obvious. It is our reasoner's object merely to show that this body is not Marie's. He wishes to prove that Marie is not assassinated, not that the corpse was not. Yet his observation proves only the latter point. Here is a corpse, without weight attached. Murderers casting it in would not have failed to attach such a weight. Therefore it was not thrown in by murderers. This is all which is proved, if anything is. And the question of identity is not even approached, and L'Etoile has been at great pains merely to gainsay now what it has admitted only a moment before. We are perfectly convinced, it says, that the body found was that of a murdered female. Nor is this the sole instance, even in this division of his subject, where our reasoner unwittingly reasons against himself. His evident object, I have already said, is to reduce as much as possible the interval between Marie's disappearance and the finding of the corpse. Yet we find him urging the point that no one person saw the girl from the moment of her leaving her mother's house. We have no evidence, he says, that Marie Roget was in the land of the living after 9 o'clock on Sunday, June the 22nd. As his argument is obviously an ex parte one, he should at least have left this matter out of sight. For had anyone been known to see Marie on Monday or on Tuesday, the interval in question would have been much reduced, and by his own ratiocination, the probability much diminished of the corpse being that of the grisette. It is nevertheless amusing to observe that L'Etoile insists upon this point in the full belief of its furthering the general argument. Reperuse now the portion of this argument which has reference to the identification of the corpse by Beauvais in regard to the hair upon the arm. L'Etoile has been obviously disingenuous. Monsieur Beauvais, not being an idiot, could not have urged an identification of the corpse. Simply hair upon its arm. No arm is without hair. The generality of the expression of L'Etoile is a mere perversion of the witness's phraseology. He must have spoken of some peculiarity in his hair. It must have been a peculiarity of color, of quantity, of length, or of situation. Her foot, says the journal, was small. So are thousands of feet. Her garters, no proof whatever, nor is her shoe, for shoes and garters are sold in packages. The same may be said of the flowers in her hat. One thing upon which Mr. Bouvier strongly insists is that the clasp on the garter found had not been set back to take it in. But this amounts to nothing, for most women find it proper to take a pair of garters home and fit them to the size of the limbs they are to encircle, rather than to try them in the store where they purchase. Here it is difficult to suppose the reasoner in earnest. Had Monsieur Bonvet, in his search for the body of Marie, discovered a corpse corresponding in general size and appearance to the missing girl, he would not have been warranted, without reference to the question of habiliment at all, in forming an opinion that this search had been successful, if, in addition to the point of general size and contour, he had found upon the arm a peculiar hairy appearance which he had observed upon the living Marie. His opinion might have been justly strengthened, and the increase of positiveness might well have been in the ratio of the peculiarity or unusualness of the hairy mark. If, the feet of Marie being small, those of the corpse were also small, the increase of probability that the body was that of Marie will not be an increase in ratio merely arithmetical, but in one highly geometrical or accumulative. Add to all this shoes, such as she had been known to wear upon the day of her appearance, and although these shoes may be sold in packages, you so far augment the probability as to verge upon the certain. What of itself would be no evidence of identity becomes through its corroborative position proof most sure. Give us then flowers in the hat corresponding to those worn by the missing girl, and we seek for nothing further. If only one flower, we seek for nothing further. What then if it's two or three or more? Each successive one is a multiple evidence, proof not added to proof, but multiplied by hundreds or thousands. Let us now discover upon the deceased garters, such as the living used, and it is almost folly to proceed. But these garters are found to be tightened by the setting back of a clasp, in just such a manner as our own had been tightened by Marie shortly previous to her leaving home. It is now madness or hypocrisy to doubt. What L'Etoile says in respect to this abbreviation of the garters being an unusual occurrence shows nothing beyond its own pertinacity in error. The elastic nature of the clasp garter is self-demonstration of the unusualness of the abbreviation. What is made to adjust itself must of necessity require foreign adjustment, but rarely. It must have been an accident in its strictest sense that these garters of Marie needed the tightening described. They alone would have amply established her identity, but it is not that the corpse was found to have garters of the missing girl, or found to have her shoes, or her bonnet, or the flowers of her bonnet, or her feet, or a peculiar mark upon the arm, or her general size and appearance. It is the corpse had each and all collectively. Could it be proved that the editor of L'Etoile really entertained a doubt under the circumstances, there would be no need in this case of a commission de lunatica inquirindo. He is thought it sagacious to echo the small talk of lawyers who, for the most part, content themselves with echoing the rectangular precepts of the courts. I should here observe that very much of what is rejected as evidence by a court is the best evidence to the intellect, for the court, guided by itself, by the general principles of evidence, the recognized and booked principles, is averse from swerving at particular instances, and this steadfast adherence to principle with vigorous disregard of the conflicting exception is a sure mode of attaining the maximum of attainable truth in any long sequence of time. The practice, in mass, is therefore philosophical, but it is not the less certain that it engenders vast individual error. Raiders! Raiders!
We got Raiders. Baba Tumpo. Hello, Angelic Cabbage. Welcome, Raiders. Yeah, please do. We're just we're just a few pages away from finishing up for the night, mind. Um, mm, yep. Tea tonight. What kind of tea? Yes, tea tonight. Yeah, ginger mix of some kind. Sims 1 stream when? Will we find out who did it? Not tonight. We won't bubbly now. Nope. It's going to be a two-hander, I'm afraid. It's 40 odd pages. This started on page 69, 169. Spill the tea. Cliffhanger. Yeah, I know. I mean, I've got no clue at the minute, to be honest. Let's get back to my French accent, or my attempt at a bad French accent. Uh, oh yeah, the courts. For the court, guided by itself by the principles of evidence, the recognized and booked principles is adverse from swerving at particular instances, and this steadfast adherence to principle with vigorous disregard of the conflicting exception is a sure mode of attaining the maximum of attainable truth in any long sequence of time. The practice in mass, this is the problem with this, Jay, you just kind of keep sinking lower into it. In respect to the insinuations levelled at Beauvais, you will be willing to dismiss as what would you dismiss them in a breath. You've already fathomed the true character of this good gentleman. He is a busybody with much romance and little of wit. Anyone so constituted will readily so conduct himself upon the occasion of real excitement as to render himself liable to suspicion on the part of the over acute or the ill disposed. Monsieur Beauvais, as it appears from your notes, had some personal interviews with the editor of L'Etoile and offended him by venturing an opinion that the corpse, notwithstanding by the theory of the editor, was in fact sober fact that of Marie. He persists, says the paper, in asserting the corpse to be that of Marie, but cannot give a circumstance in addition to those which we have commented upon to make others believe. Now, without re-adverting to the fact that the stronger evidence to make others believe could never have been adduced, it may be remarked that a man may very well be understood to believe in a case of this kind without the ability to advance a single reason for the belief of the second party. Nothing is more vague than impressions of individual identity. Each man recognizes his neighbor, yet there are few instances in which anyone is prepared to give a reason for his recognition. The editor of L'Etoile had no right to be offended at Mr. Beauvais's unreasoning belief. The suspicious circumstances which invest him will be found to tally much better with my hypothesis of romantic busybodyism than with the reasonable suggestion of guilt. Once adopting the more charitable interpretation, we shall find no difficulty in comprehending the rose in the keyhole, the Marie upon the slate, the elbowing the male relatives out of the way, the aversion to permitting them to see the body, the caution given to Madame B that she must hold no conversations with the gendarme until his, Beauvais' return, and lastly, his apparent determination that nobody should have anything to do with the proceedings except himself. It seems to me unquestionable that Beauvais was a suitor of Marie's, that she coquetted with him, and that he was ambitious of being thought to enjoy her fullest intimacy and confidence. I shall say nothing more upon this point.
and as the evidence fully rebuts the assertion of L'Etoile touching the matter of apathy on the part of the mother and other relatives, an apathy inconsistent with the supposition of their believing the corpse to be that of the perfumery girl. We shall now proceed as if the question of identity were settled to our perfect satisfaction. And what, I here demanded, do you think of the opinions of Le Commerciel? That in spirit they are far more worthy of attention than any of which have been promulgated upon the subject. The deductions from the premises are philosophical and acute, but the premises, in two instances at least, are founded in imperfect observation. Le Commerciel wishes to be intimate that Marie was seized by some gang of low ruffians not far from her mother's door. It is impossible, it urges, that a person so well known to thousands as this young woman was should have passed 3 blocks without anyone having seen her. But this is the idea of a man long resident in Paris, a public man, and one whose walks to and from the city have been mostly limited to the vicinity of the public offices. He is aware that he seldom passes so far as a dozen blocks from his own bureau without being recognized and accosted. And knowing the extent of his personal acquaintances with others and of others with him, he compares his notoriety with that of the perfumery girl, finds no great difference between them, and reaches at once the conclusion that she, in her walks, would be equally liable to recognition with himself in his. This could only be the case were her walks of the same unvarying, methodical character, and within the same species of limited region as are his own. He passes to and fro at regular intervals within a confined periphery, abounding in individuals who are led to the observation of his person through interest in the kindred nature of his occupation of their own. But the walks of Marie may, in general, be supposed discursive. In this particular instance, it will be understood as most probable that she proceeded upon a route of more than average diversity from her accustomed ones. The parallel, which we imagine to have existed in the mind of La Commercielle, would only be sustained in the event of the two individuals traversing the whole city. In this case, granting the personal acquaintances to be equal, the chances would also be equal that an equal number of personal rencontres could be made. Rencontres could be made. For my own part, I should hold it not only as possible, but as far more than probable that Marie. It's alright, EO, BCB, it's been happening all night. Good and I. Without meeting a single individual whom she knew or by whom she was known. In viewing this question in its proper light, we must hold steadily in mind the great disproportion between the personal acquaintance of even the most noted individual in Paris and the entire population of Paris itself. But whatever force there may still appear in the suggestion of Le Commerciel, which will be diminished when we take into consideration the hour at which the girl went abroad, it was when the streets were full of people, says Le Commerciel, that she went out, but not so. It was at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, at 9 o'clock in the morning in the week, with the exception of Sunday, the streets of the city are, it is true, thronged with people. At 9 on Sunday, the populace are chiefly within their doors, preparing for church. No observing person can have failed to notice the peculiarity deserted air of the town from about 8 until 10 on the morning of every Sabbath. Between 10 and 11, the streets are thronged, but not as early as a period as that designated. Good stuff. Bedtime stories with Dadzig. Well, what can I say? We got a couple more pages, guys, and then we're gonna have to call it quits for the evening, because otherwise I will drift off. Um, Between not observing person can have failed to have noticed the peculiarly deserted air of the town from about 8 until 10 on the morning of every Sabbath. Between 10 and 11, the streets are thronged, but not at so early a period as that designated. There is another point at which there seems a deficiency of observation on the part of Le Commerciel. A piece, it says, of one of the most unfortunate girl's petticoats, 2 feet long and 1 foot wide, was torn out and tied under her chin and around the back of her head, probably to prevent screams. This was done by fellows who had no pocket handkerchiefs. Whether this idea is or is not well founded, we will endeavor to see hereafter, but by fellows who have no pocket handkerchiefs, the editor intends the lowest class of ruffians. These, however, are the very description of people who will always be found to have handkerchiefs, even when destitute of shirts. You must have had occasion to observe how absolutely indispensable of late to the thorough blackguard has become the pocket handkerchief. And what are you to think, and what are we to think, I asked, of the article in Le Soleil? Oh, that is a vast pity. Its editor was not born a parrot, in which case he would have been the most illustrious parrot of his race. He was merely repeating the individual items of the rarely published opinion, collecting them with a laudable industry from this paper and from that. The things had all evidently been there, he says, at least 3 or 4 weeks, and there can be no doubt that the spot of this appalling outrage has been discovered. These facts here, restated by Le Soleil, are very far indeed from removing my doubts upon this subject. We will examine them more particularly hereafter in connection with another division of the theme. At present, we must occupy ourselves with other investigations. You cannot fail to have remarked the extreme laxity of the examination of the corpse. To be sure, the question of identity was readily determined, or should have been, but there were other points to be ascertained. Had the body been in any respect despoiled? Had the deceased any particulars of jewelry about her person upon leaving home? If so, had she any when she found? These are important questions, utterly untouched by the evidence, and there are others of equal amount which have met with no attention. Now we must endeavor to satisfy ourselves with personal inquiry. The case of Saint Eustache must be re-examined. I have no suspicion of this person, but let us proceed methodically. We will ascertain beyond a doubt that the validity of the affidavits in regard to his whereabouts on the Sunday. Affidavits of his character readily made matter of mystification. Should there be nothing wrong here, however, we will dismiss Saint Eustache from our investigations. His suicide, however, corroborative of suspicion, whether found to be deceit in the affidavits, is without much deceit, in no respect an unaccountable circumstance, from one which need cause us to deflect from the line of ordinary analysis. In that which I will now propose, we will discard the interior points of this tragedy and concentrate our attention upon its outskirts. Not the least usual error in investigations such as this is the limiting of inquiry to the immediate, with total disregard of the collateral or circumstantial events. It is the malpractice of the courts to confine evidence and discussion to the bounds of apparent relevancy. Yet experience has shown, and the true philosophy will always show, that the vast, perhaps the larger portion of truth arises from the seemingly irrelevant. It is through the spirit of this principle, if not precisely through its letter, that modern science has resolved to calculate upon the unforeseen. But perhaps you do not comprehend me. The history of human knowledge has so uninterruptedly shown that to collateral or incidental or accidental events we're indebted for the most numerous and most valuable discoveries, that it has at length become necessary in prospective view of improvement to make not only large, but the largest allowance for inventions that shall arise by chance, quite at the range of ordinary expectation. It is no longer philosophical to base upon what has been a vision of what is to be. Accident is admitted as a portion of the substructure. We make chance a matter of absolute calculation. We subject the unlooked for and unimagined to the mathematical formulae of the schools. I repeat that it is no more the fact that the larger portion of all truth has sprung from the collateral, and it is but in accordance with the spirit of the principle involved in this fact that I would divert inquiry, in the present case, from the trodden and hitherto unfruitful ground of the event itself to the contemporary circumstances which surround it. While you ascertain the validity of the affidavits, I will examine the newspapers more generally than you have as yet done. So far, we've only reconnoitered the field of investigation, but it will be strange indeed if a comprehensive survey, such as I propose, of the public prints will not afford us some minute points which will establish a direction for inquiry. In pursuance of Dupin's suggestion, I made scrupulous examination of the affair of the affidavits. The result was a firm conviction of their validity and of the consequent innocence of St. Eustache. In the meanwhile, my friend occupied himself with what seemed to me a minuteness altogether objectless in a scrutiny of the various newspaper files. At the end of a week, he placed before me the following extracts. About 3.5 years ago, a disturbance very similar to the present was caused by the disappearance of the same Marie Roget from the parfumerie of Monsieur Leblanc in the Palais Royal. At the end of the week, however, she reappeared at her customary comptoir, as well as ever, with the exception of a slight paleness not altogether usual. It was given out by fuck this shit. Yeah, no bosoms tonight. I mean, is it Twitch or is it the internet connection? I don't know. It was given out by Monsieur Leblanc and her mother that she had merely been on a visit to some friend in the country, and the affair was speedily hushed up. We presume that the present absence is a freak of the same nature, and that, at the expiration of a week or perhaps a month, she shall have her among us again. Evening paper, Monday, June 23rd. An evening journal An evening journal of yesterday refers to a former mysterious disappearance of Mademoiselle Roget. It is well known that, during the week of her absence from Leblanc's parfumerie, she was in the company of a young naval officer much noted for his debaucheries. A quarrel, it is supposed, providentially led her to return home. We have the name of the Lothario in question, who is at present stationed in Paris, but for obvious reasons forbear to make it public. Le Mercury, Tuesday morning, June 24th. An outrage of the most atrocious character was perpetrated near this city the day before yesterday. A gentleman, with his wife and daughter, engaged about dusk the services of 6 young men who were idly rowing a boat to and fro the banks of the Seine to convey him across the river. Upon reaching the opposite shore, the 3 passengers stepped out, and had proceeded so far as to be beyond the view of the boat, when the daughter discovered that she had left in it her parasol. She returned for it, was seized by the gang, carried out into the stream, gagged, brutally treated, and finally taken to the shore at a point not far from that which she had originally entered the boat with her parents. The villains have escaped for the time, but the police are upon their trail, and some of them will soon be taken. Morning paper, June 25th. We have received 1 or 2 communications, the object of which is to fasten the crime of the late atrocity upon Menays. But as this gentleman has been fully exonerated by legal inquiry, and as the arguments of our several correspondents appear to be more zealous than profound, we do not think it advisable to make them public. Morning paper, June 28th. We have received several forcibly written communications, apparently from various sources, which go far to render it a matter of certainty that the unfortunate Marie Roget has been a victim of one of the numerous bands of blackguards which invested the vicinity of the city upon Sunday. Our own opinion is decidedly in favour of this supposition. We shall endeavour to make room for some of these arguments hereafter. Evening paper, Tuesday, June 30th. On Monday, one of the bargemen connected with the revenue service saw an empty boat floating down the Seine. Sails were lying in the bottom of the boat. The bargeman towed it under the barge office. The next morning it was taken from thence without the knowledge of any of the officers. The rudder is now at the barge office. Le Diligence, Thursday, June 26th. Raiders! Oh, you're coming to raid! Peekaboo, I'm just finishing. Oh, I'm just finishing. I've been reading for 2 hours now. My voice is all tired. Thank you, Danny, for coming to raid. Oh, you're exposed. You're exposed to me. Yeah, your worst private bits I've seen.
I look sleepy. Well, it's 11:20. Waking me up. No, I've just been Agnes of Bohemia has been reading for two hours plus, so I can't continue reading. Honestly, it's past Dad's bedtime. Also, to be fair, um, I've got to do some other stuff. Go to bed. Oh, there it is. I need to make sure my socials are in order, or something like that. Yeah, whatever. No, got to think about this Saturday, haven't I? I'm gonna be doing Laws of Misrule. So, got to make sure that's properly hyped up. Thank you, Angelic Cabbage, for raiding. Thank you, Danny, for raiding. Thank you for all the beautiful jewels and gifts and wiggly zigglies and giving me little diamonds and Keta Tangle. All the cheers. And we had a hype train early on. That's quite nice. And people subscribing, I thank you very much. Monster Heart, ACP. El Cannon loves it. It's on. Erin is on. Yeah. Yeah, that's Radar. What's her what's her handle? And how do I do this again? I keep forgetting. Raid / panic squid. Right. Gone with the fairies. Okay. So / raid panic squad. Panic squid. What? Panic squid. All right, my dears. No matches. What does that mean? Because it has to be a capital P or something, is it? Oh, that's not a match. What's Erin's handle, guys? The panic squid. All right, gang. We're going to start this raid shortly, and I hope to see you on Saturday for some souping. That's what I need to do now. I need to find what the hell a Croatian soup is all about. Some of these are fish based, by the way. And I need to do it so that you all have time to buy some ingredients, especially if it's fish based and we live in the Czech Republic. I mean, getting fresh fish, I'll probably be using frozen, frankly. Yeah. What do we not like fish soup? I love fish soup. But it's the thing about Croatia, because otherwise it just goes very a fish soup. Yes. You've never had fish soup. Good. Mrs. Dadzig is a hater of fish soup. It depends on the fish, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if it's kapper, no, we're not talking carp soup. We definitely don't want to be making 2 gallons of it. Crawfish is not quite the same. This minute. All right. Yeah, well, there we go. See, Dashi live. My Galician soup with fish is very tasty. That's right. So it's very similar. There's going to be some cooked up fish bits. Where will I get fish in this? I go to Lidl. Lidl have fish. It's okay. Albert, at least in Prague, have a pretty good fresh fish selection. And I think there's nothing wrong with using frozen fish, to be honest. Often, frozen fish can be fresher than fresh fish because they freeze the fish on the ship often. So it ends up being fish. Ziggy Wiggy Stardust! Thank you! Right at the end there. You've never cooked fish before? At all? Wowsies. Okay. Fish it yourself, that's what, yeah. It's a bit limited in Central Europe. There's no coastline. Fresh frozen fish. Fresh frozen fish. Is this fish frozen or is it fresh? Ice them trout. No, it's true though. Yeah, this is trout, bream, pike, right? Carp. There we go. That's also a fair point. You've never attempted to poaching fish. Okay, so we'll do a fish special at some point as well. Okay. The only fish we have gnocchi is that is that what is gnocchi? Oh, you mean your neon tetras from your tank? Take Logan fishing, camping. We can go camping. We can go fishing. I'm not the angler, to be honest. That'll be my bro. Yeah, well, you can get a fishing license to do that here as well, for sure. But I just never been bothered. So, gang, we're gonna raid Erin. I'm gonna have a look more from Croatian soups and try and get your recipe by tonight or tomorrow. Logan Fisher. Um, Fishing in the UK with a polluted water wouldn't be good. Well, well. Um, well, I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty crap, isn't it? Pretty shitty. Depends on what you eat as well. I mean, I love mackerel, but they mackerel are doing, what do they do? That mackerel eat all the crap. So, and the irony is actually, in terms of sea fish at least, the ones that are at the bottom of the food chain are healthier in terms of like mercury and shit like that, because tuna tasty. Swordfish, tasty, but they're the top of the pyramid, and they absorb all that mercury from all the little ones at the bottom. Whatever. I think he's not to worry too much about it, and that drive yourself crazy with all these different faults and whatever else. All right. Raid is on. Unrecognized command. Fuck's sake. /raid space okay, so I need to leave a space, did I? All right. Here we go. 6, 7, 5, 4, 3. We're gonna raid. We're raiding. We're raiding. We're going in for a raid. Raid now. See you, gang. See you Saturday. If not, maybe on Friday for the show.